So yesterday I was at a meeting full of a couple hundred realtors here locally, Pinellas County and Tampa, and I was struck by the feeling that we're once again in this sort of bubble era. The communication among all the realtors was one of enthusiasm and excitement because every listing that they got up onto the market was pretty quickly met with several offers, and in many times it's full price offers. But one of the things that struck me was when they talked about those houses that were in the sweet spot, as they called it, there was next to no availability at all. And, that's a dramatic circumstance that dovetails in with something that I've been concerned about with a very long time, and that is with the conduct of foreclosure cases. A lot of attention is paid by press and policymakers and everyone else in this field about the number of new foreclosure filings. And we talk with oftentimes completely inaccurate data about the number of new foreclosure filings, with press and policymakers not focusing on what really is the source of data for new foreclosure filings, and that is our clerks of court. If you're not relying on data that comes directly from the clerks of courts that tell you precisely how many foreclosure cases have been filed within a judicial circuit, then you're not relying on correct data. And so one of the key indicators that you're dealing with incorrect data is when they give a region that is not contained within a court's jurisdiction. So, in the 6th Judicial Circuit, I can tell you precisely how many new foreclosure cases have been filed, but I can't tell you in a regional way, other than combining each of the circuits. So I could tell you the 6th Judicial Circuit, 444 new foreclosure cases filed. Hillsborough County, the 13th Judicial Circuit, exactly how many there, Manatee County. But when these things start getting blended together, that's your key indication that the data you're relying on is wrong. Anyway, let's not focus on new foreclosure cases filed. The most important piece of data that must be focused on when we talk about foreclosures, and particularly when we're talking about any new foreclosure legislation or any new public policy dealing with foreclosures, is what's happened to the old cases. And to that end, I'm going to attach to this video a spreadsheet that I've prepared, which shows all of the foreclosure cases filed in Pinellas County, all of the foreclosure sales that have been held in Pinellas County in 2012. Now, importantly, this data comes from the online auction source that conducts all of the foreclosure sales in Pinellas County, and they're basically the same source for most of the counties across the state of Florida. I went in there, I inputted the data, and I downloaded a spreadsheet which showed all of the foreclosure sales. Now, the first thing that struck me about this was the small number of foreclosure sales. Only 4,444, I believe it was, 4,432. In the entire year 2012, only 4,432 foreclosure sales in the entire county. Some of that includes timeshares. Many of those are going to include homeowners association liens and other things. But, think about that, and this is a key point. And all the millions of dollars that taxpayers in the state of Florida have invested in our court system in this foreclosure process, only 4,000 sales have occurred in this county. Now, that is not to say that that's the amount of judgments that have been entered. We know that that number is significantly greater. These plaintiffs are getting judgments of foreclosure, and then because they don't want title to the property, they don't want to be responsible for the taxes, the maintenance, the upkeep, and other things, they are canceling those sales. I know here locally some of the judges have entered orders and established procedures whereby after a judgment has been entered and the sale has been entered, the plaintiff can no longer cancel that to try and get to the heart of that problem. Another important data set is here in Pinellas County, we have approximately 28,000 old foreclosure cases pending, probably 1,000 new ones being added every 2 months or so. But focusing on those old ones, the data that was introduced was that there were 28,000 foreclosure cases pending. But back to the number of sales, because that's the most important data set. What is most disturbing and a key piece of data that should be understood when you look at this spreadsheet is the amount of properties that went to third-party purchasers. And in the entire year 2012, only 888 of those 4,000 plus foreclosure auctions went to third-party purchasers. And if you sort the Excel spreadsheet that's going to be attached here, you can see where that data sort breaks off, because you just go into column F and select the bidder, successful bidder, and it'll sort it out by individual bidder numbers and plaintiff. And so that really disturbing thing is that only 888 of these things are going back to plaintiff. And as I looked in 2013, that number becomes roughly correct. I looked prior in 2011. And what happens is something like 90% in those prior years of the foreclosure judgments revert back to plaintiff. Now, here's where this is so important. The concept of foreclosure from a public policy perspective was that we are supposed to be throwing out the bad owner and then getting back in some good owner. There's supposed to be this public auction process whereby on the courthouse steps, the general public is allowed to be there and determine what's the market value of that property. And then you would have entrepreneurs, flippers and contractors and investors who would be standing there on the courthouse steps, or in this case in the electronic forum, which opens it up to the entire world and allows individuals to purchase these properties, get in there, put contractors to work, put roofers to work, licensed by the way, and then put these properties back to effective use. But that in fact is not what's happening, and that's why this is most disturbing. You see, when these properties, 3,000 plus of them in 2012, revert back to the plaintiffs, Bank of America, Wells, Fannie, and these other servicers, they are merely straw parties that are then holding them for the ultimate owners of these things, Fannie, Freddie, and the other government-sponsored entities that actually own the mortgages that are being foreclosed. So, and the private trust, Deutsche Bank, and some of these offshore foreign trusts. So, that's the key piece of evidence from a public policy and legal perspective to understand, is that Bank of America doesn't own these mortgages and loans. Citi doesn't own these mortgages and loans. And when they're foreclosing, when they are the plaintiff that is throwing an American out into the street, they're not doing it for themselves. They're doing it for the party that's hiding behind the scenes. And until we start to be honest and get more disclosure about what's actually occurring here, we're not making good public policy decisions. We need to address the fact, and first understand the fact, that when a foreclosure happens, when we're throwing that bad homeowner out into the street, we're not doing that so that we can get some other owner onto that property and continue this cycle of private property ownership. What's occurring here is the properties are being pooled and they're being sold in bulk to large institutional investors, the Fannie and Freddie bulk sales programs. And what we know from the initial bulk sales initiatives that have occurred is that the successful bidders in these things are large institutional investors, hedge funds, Wall Street types, the same ones that got us into this problem, and importantly, foreign investors. That's a big problem that nobody is paying attention to. You know, we know that some of the largest investor in government bonds back for years had been China, but that's shifted over a series of years such that China were making their investments into Fannie Mae bonds and securities and into mortgage-backed securities. Let's be clear about what that means. When an investor is owning these mortgage-backed securities, they don't at that point in time have actual title to the property, but the end product of the foreclosure is that the investor in those actually takes title to those properties. And what we see in the space of these Fannie Mae bulk sales, we are actually having foreign entities, whether it be through the actual purchasers who are disclosed as corporate financial entities, or at the trusts that are taking title to these properties. What is occurring is we're actually having private or foreign entities that are taking title to the very dirt upon which this nation is built. And that's a consequence and a phenomenon that we need to understand, but nobody in the public policy spectrum is talking about that. So again, that's why this data set is important. Look at the spreadsheet, and I'll download another one which shows it from 2011, and then learn how to navigate through there. Pay attention, another interesting thing, to the years of the foreclosures filing. When was it filed? And you can get that by looking at the first column there. That's when the sale happened, but then in the second column we go into the year number, and I found it interesting to see the number of these sales just kind of scanning through down there, 2012, 2011, 2010 cases. But as we consider what's happening in these rocket dockets that are being set up again, we understand that what's occurring is our court system, the public court system, is being funded with millions of dollars, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer revenue, and that what that court system is acting as a functionary for the banks and institutions, the financial institutions that did so much wrong in this country. And so our public dollars are being used to fund our court system, which is then in turn being used to transfer property out of private and individuals' hands and into the hands of institutional investors and foreign investors. It's a dramatic consequence that we're not paying enough attention to. Look, 2012, only 4,000 foreclosure sales. In this county, that's frankly not all that significant. But in 2013, as a result of these ramped up rocket docket proceedings, what we're going to see is a dramatic increase in that of the foreclosure sales that are occurring. And if we're not paying attention as public policy activists and as taxpayers, as citizens, to the end product of these foreclosures, the end product being that private property is being concentrated into the hands of a few institutional investors and government and federal sources, then we're all missing a big part of this problem. Getting back to the impact on realtors, in that meeting where you have these independent entrepreneurial realtors who all they wanted was inventory properties that they could put out there and sell to other parties and make money on that, these people are really being cut out by these institutional sources that are taking these properties, turning them over to renters, and then again excluding the local realtors that could be doing good work on these properties.